look what we had happen in the month of April there. I mean, that market fell, 15 to 20%, depending on which index you're using in a very short amount of time. And then all of a sudden, here we are back at record highs. It's just, it is unpredictable a lot of times.
And welcome into your game plan for retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for a common sense approach to planning for your money, your financial, your investment, your retirement future. He is president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services. Chris McIntire here with us on your game plan for retirement, our head coach. And Chris, you always start the program with a financial tip of the week. What do you have going as we look ahead to 2026?
Yeah, and I would say, set a goal to, make sure you're getting all your items in order. Powers of attorney, all those kinds of documents. Update your wills, your trusts, and get a financial plan in place. Whatever your goals are, and like we often say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So don't get overwhelmed. Take one small part, get that done, move on to the next one. That's the tip of the week.
Yeah, I follow Dave Ramsey, who has his baby step system, and I believe the reason why that's so successful, Chris, is that Dave forces you to focus and concentrate on just one thing at a time. His system basically eliminates the urge to try to multitask on things, and I think that's what you're talking about here as well, is that we know we need a plan put together. We know there are a lot of parts to that plan. Just focus on one step at a time. The first things first, and make progress that way.
Yeah, very sound advice right there. Not many people can multitask. You and I run businesses, so, we're forced to multitask even if we don't want to.
Yeah, but I mean, on the weekends, I start a project and then I'll start another project and get distracted and start another project. And my wife will look around and she's like, you're making a mess everywhere. I'm like, I'm working on things. She's like, but you haven't finished any of them. And by the end of the weekend, I'll have to go back and force myself one at a time. But when we are trying to multitask, we don't get anything accomplished to the highest level or all the way to completion the way we would if we just focused on those one things. So I think, again, you talk about your game plan for retirement, offensive, defensive strategies, the first half of the game, the second half of the game, making the transition, getting all the pieces together. But it takes a lot, but that's why you have the ongoing relationship with your clients, that you just focus on one thing at a time and making sure all the pieces are in place, and that the plan reflects our ongoing changes in life, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And, at our office, between Robin and I and Heidi, we all have aging parents, and, that's what we're facing right now. And, the time consumption of all of that is, can be overwhelming for sure. And, it's just as we go through phases of life, we concentrate. Peter's younger. He's got his son in baseball and whatnot, and they're all the time bouncing to baseball games and whatnot. And as you get a little bit older, all of a sudden you become caregivers and whatnot for your parents and or other family members, aunts and uncles and neighbors. And it's funny how life deals us, all these different cards and the hands that we have to play. There's the analogy.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Chris McIntire is your resource, helping to construct and put together that game plan for retirement. If you would like to get yours put together or review and double check your investments, your strategies, your tax implications, and make sure that you are controlling what you can for the variables into the future that will impact and affect your life, that is what having that game plan allows you to do with confidence. Pick up the phone, get the conversation started. It is a complimentary, no-cost courtesy service that they offer there at McIntire Retirement Services to help put that game plan for retirement together for you. 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532. Chris, as we were planning for this program, I was reflecting on all of the predictions that we heard would come true in 2025 financially. And man, it was a year of surprises. And as often is the case, a lot of those predictions were wrong. And here we are again looking at 2026. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of predictions predictions being made in the coming weeks and month here that maybe they'll turn out, maybe they won't, but there's really no way to accurately predict what is going to come at us in the year ahead, in life, but in money and finance and the economies and markets as well.
Yeah, and I mean, let's go back to 2022, Peter, and the Federal Reserve raised interest rates 11 times more faster than any time in US history, basically, in modern history, let's call it. And everybody thought we were going to have a severe recession because the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates to hurt the economy, to slow things down. Obviously, coming out of COVID and all the stimulus that was out there, we had an overstimulated economy. So
All that inflation.
yep, of all that inflation, and we didn't even go into a recession. Okay, and then we go through the tariffs of this year. What was that? Liberation Day. And everybody thought, all right, well, here comes the recession. Well, it didn't happen. Okay, inflation is still pretty persnickety out there. And affordability is the word of the day here coming from one of the political parties. But it's like, well, look at the price of gas. Oil is $60 a barrel. The price of gas has come down significantly. That's like a tax cut. So but food and grocery items, and I don't know what the Christmas stuff you're buying for your son is, but it's not like, inflation has slowed down, but it's not like we got rid of what we had to experience right after COVID. That is still, all that damage is still out there, from the pricing structure. And now, as we look into 2026, everything I've read and heard, I had on CNBC this morning, there was a lady from Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, her U.S. equity strategist, the lead person, and was talking about the S&P 500 between 7,200 and 7,800 in 2026. We've had tax cuts with the one big beautiful bill, a lot of business-friendly items, artificial intelligence helping to for the productivity. That may also hurt the job front, obviously, too. But still no recession on the horizon.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a year that certainly had turbulence, but a good year in the markets and some surprises along the way, some advancements in a little bit more certainty for certain items. The tariff day you mentioned, Liberation Day, that was a jolt to the market. But the passage of the one big beautiful bill, I think you're right that affordability kind of drove the headlines. The AI boom, the Fed and central banks playing with interest rates, trade tensions, the price of gold, silver, and commodities. I mean, just to name a few of the headlines from the past year, Chris. Again, no way to know what is going to happen in the year ahead, but the predictions are that we will see another advantageous year, and despite all of the headwinds we faced last year, this year, 2025, the market was resilient, and we all appreciate that.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And, it has been rewarding for those of you that have owned stocks and even bonds this year, Peter. The 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds that everybody said in 2022 is broken, because they raised interest rates so much that hurt bond prices and stock prices in the same year. Okay. Well, it's not like things break like that, Peter. They have years they don't perform like people anticipate. And, that's what happens when you invest. Everybody thinks the market only goes up. It does not. Look what we had happen in the month of April there. I mean, that market fell, 15 to 20%, depending on which index you're using, in a very short amount of time. And then all of a sudden, here we are back at record highs. It's just, it is unpredictable a lot of times, and you just build a portfolio around your success. Make sure you get those 401k matches, make those contributions on those regular scheduled intervals. We call that dollar cost averaging. I would think Dave Ramsey is a big proponent of that. I know you have a kind of a relationship with his firm over there, Peter. But certainly, that bodes well for investors, is to keep putting the money in. You can reallocate the balance of your 401k into something more conservative. And then when the market dips, you can put your contributions into something more aggressive.
Yep. Well, we will be talking about what steps to take, regardless of what the world and the market and the surprises that are in store for us next year bring. What are the steps for building financial momentum and ultimately success in the year and the years ahead here on the program today? So, we got 10 tips for you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try to move through and get to them all. But I do want to remind you that the number one tip, have a plan that incorporates all of these items. That is the roadmap and the game plan for success. Your game plan for retirement is the plan that Chris McIntire and his team can help put together for you, with you, reflecting your goals, personalized strategies, a long-term time horizon, diversified options and investments. Pick up the phone if you would like to get that process started. 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532, or online at McIntyreRetirementServices.com. McIntyreRetirementServices.com. So, Chris, step number one in formulating a foundation for long-term success. This is not a selfish notion. This is an important premise, is plan for yourself before the kids or parents. Put your own mask on first, in other words, because that's going to be the stabilizing force for those around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. You've got to keep your ship from sinking so that you can, if you need to launch a lifeboat to help out family members and whatnot, absolutely. And, look, this is a hard thing to do. A lot of parents love their kids and their grandkids. And, there's one thing of extending a helping hand. There's another thing about enabling them to, have bad behavior. And, I can speak to that. My family isn't perfect by any stretch. And, as good as people as my parents are, that, they've also been enablers as well. And for full disclosure, I say that tongue in cheek, of course.
Well, responsibility is not innate. It is taught and learned. And so
Yep.
I think that that is part of the lesson here. But again, just making sure that you are in as best and as most stable situation as possible is what is going to allow you to, where and when appropriate, help those around you, those loved ones, and ultimately leave them in the best shape. So what's best for your children or your parents often is doing the best thing for yourself. Step two, Chris, in the roadmap to long-term success and the game plan for retirement, get the free money. Don't overlook any kind of match on a 401k. I mean, you can't get that return anywhere else, can you? At least not guaranteed.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody's going to hand you that money, you certainly want to take advantage of that. And Peter and I, being self-employed, would certainly tell you guys, take advantage if your employer is going to give you some free money. And, I'm not sure where all the matches line up nowadays. Back, previously in COVID, everybody, kind of curtailed the matches they were doing to, as companies were hoarding cash. And as the employment expanded and we came out of COVID, many more companies started to, give that match or even up the match so that they didn't lose their employees. And hopefully that trend is continuing. We put a 401k in place this year, so that we could help, and we have a match program as well.
Yeah, but the term free money, Chris, you're working for that money, whether you receive it or not. It's just if you don't put any skin in the game, if it is a match, you won't get that part of your compensation. And man, are those dollars valuable for us down the road in retirement? So again, whether it's even 50% or 100%, certainly make sure that you are capturing any match that's on the table. Step three in the formula, in the game plan here for long-term financial success, Chris, and priorities maybe for the year ahead, pay off high interest debt, especially credit cards.
Yeah, we like to assist people with how they do some of the budgetary items here. What makes the most sense, and some people do have a significant amount of debt going into retirement, and some of it is good debt, some of it not so good. And obviously, high credit card balances, we would put that under the not so good category. And you pay off, focus and get one of those credit cards down.
Well, Chris, paying off those high interest credit cards, especially, it's kind of like the 401k. You can't beat the match on the 401k, and typically, generally, you can't out invest or outperform the interest rate that is being charged against you with those high interest credit cards, especially. So, we want to make that a priority for long term financial success. Pay those off if you have them, never get into them if you can avoid it. And then, step four, Chris, get properly insured. And this one, even before the emergency fund. I'm going to reference Dave Ramsey again. He's got his baby step system, but he puts insurance as a pre-baby step, especially if you've got anyone, a spouse, a child, anyone who depends on your income. Chris, life and disability insurance are essential for long-term success.
Buddy, and it's a place where so many Americans just, miss that part of the planning. And, especially for the younger generation. Peter, you got a young child there. You probably have some term insurance on yourself. I'm 60 years old and I've got $2 million of life insurance and no debt and
Yep.
no children, you
Yep.
know. But nothing does what life insurance does. Some of them have long-term care benefits with them as well, I mean, so it can solve a number of different problems, not just in case somebody passes away. So, we're pretty passionate about this, and especially for the younger folks with kids and debts, like you say, Peter, no more efficient way to protect that legacy than, using some pennies to buy dollars.
And just Chris, as an aside here, you offer your services there at McIntire Retirement Services, but this is one area, not just planning, but in looking at insurance products. You've got access and can shop across hundreds of companies to get your clients the best bang for their buck on insurance coverage and make sure that it is the right, appropriate kind of coverage for their situation. This prevents catastrophe. This we want protection and growth in our financial lives, but this is the protection that is essential before we even try to achieve that growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Peter, as you know, behind the scenes, we have a lot of great resources through asset management with our help from Brookstone Capital Management. And then on the insurance side, there are actually companies that help support us. We do case design, they help us do the bidding. And then, if we have a question, they may even reach out to an underwriter before we submit an application. So, it's so nice to have all of those resources at our discretion and still maintain our independence.
Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to shop, whether you need new coverage or you want to just price check your existing coverage and make sure that it is the right type and an appropriate kind of an insurance for you, give McIntire Retirement Services a call. That is one part of the comprehensive services and planning that they offer there. Again, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532. All right, on to the step five in your list for long-term financial success, Chris. Max out those max out those Roth IRAs, and the limits are going up for next year. So make adjustments on the 401ks and the IRAs to make sure you're making the most of those opportunities. But in particular, the Roth IRA is a great tool.
Yeah, you certainly are, and again, you want to watch your tax situation there, make sure you're making the best decisions for yourself, but those, when you're putting money into 401ks, IRAs, Roth 401ks, look down the road and imagine you're going to open this envelope 20, 25 years from now. How much tax do you want to pay on that money? Obviously, the answer is I don't want to pay any tax on it. Okay. Well, most people have all their money in 401ks. The younger generation, the younger boomers, and I'm a Gen Xer, we have a lot more in the Roth side of things than previous generations, and income tax rates have come down significantly, which makes another argument for utilizing Roth IRAs even over traditional IRAs in certain instances, Peter.
Chris, retirement services is literally in the name of your firm, McIntire Retirement Services. I know that the majority of your clients are either right on the cusp making that transition or even already retired. Several of these tips do seem like they are for lifelong financial progress. Do you ever have these kind of conversations with children and grandchildren of your clients, trying to pass the values that lead to success on throughout generations?
Yeah, and it's funny because you brought up the life insurance side, and I just had a client in here, and her son was in here not too long ago, and I said he needs to get that insurance piece in place. He's got two young kids he's responsible for.
Yeah.
It's cheap. You tell him. And
Yep.
so yes, we do have some more and more of those conversations. And what's amazing is in that younger generation, it's like they either get it or they do not. They're either well on their way and very concerned about their retirement planning in their early 30s and whatnot, or they're just oblivious and it's like there's no middle room in there, it seems like. And obviously that's probably not the case, but boy, it certainly seems like it.
I see it too, though. It seems like that younger generation caught a lot of flack for not being serious. And then all of a sudden, I was seeing people who were very serious and doing a very good job. But it's like the tale of two different worlds here. Some that just are killing it, and then some that are not paying attention to it at all. So we try to have these conversations to get more people on the side of paying attention to it and making progress because, man, retirement gets here before you know it, right, Chris?
Oh,
Um,
it sure does, Peter. And those that don't get it typically want socialism. It's like, well, you know what? That doesn't work either. So, get off your high horse and get to work and get it done.
yep. Step six, Chris, max out HSAs. These are a great opportunity that sometimes get overlooked in the value that they present to us.
Yeah, they sure are. And buddy, I've been, when we do our educational classes there at the local colleges, I often make the analogy that, look, hey guys, I would think the government's going to expand HSA contributions, so that, we can help defer healthcare costs down the road. And they certainly have that. Those thresholds are going up, and there's been more talk of that here even recently to, as we're arguing about the Affordable Care Act and the subsidies or the handouts or the welfare that the government's giving out to people who don't necessarily need it. That's the argument on the Affordable Care Act, is ending the subsidies where they were giving money out during COVID to help people with healthcare costs that they don't need to do now.
Yep. Step seven, Chris, and in our 10 steps to long-term financial success, making all the progress that we can in the year ahead, max out that 401k. Once we've done all of these other things, we come back to the 401k and get everything that we can into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And, it lowers that tax bill, which makes a lot of sense for certain individuals.
And getting that extra deduction can be helpful, depending on where our income falls today versus what we anticipate it to be in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we implemented a 401k this year in our practice to help defer some of our income. It just makes sense for us where we're at income wise. And for people who are working out there, maybe they don't have the Roth 401k where they work. More and more companies do. But if nothing else, like your buddy Dave Ramsey would say, is look, it is a forced savings and it comes out of your paycheck. You typically don't miss it. And, make sure that you're maxing out all of that to get that retirement build up, because a lot of people don't have the private pensions anymore, and they certainly need to, save more and more of that money so that they can create that income once they retire. And, the number one concern is running out of money.
Yep, and you can make a lot of progress very quickly. Increased contribution limits for the year ahead. Make sure that you are making the most where you've got the ability. If you're 49 or under, $24,500. Once you hit 50 with the catch-up provision, an additional $8,000. And a special super catch-up, Chris, a relatively new feature of the 401ks. Between 60 and 63, your catch up could be as much as $11,200. So a lot of room to make a lot of progress very quickly, even if you do feel maybe a little bit behind. Make the most of your opportunities there.
Yep. And hey, as a 60-year-old person, I'm going to take advantage of all of those that I get. And if my memory serves me correctly, Peter, in 2026, that extra contribution has to go into the Roth 401k, not the traditional. For 2025, it could go into the traditional. 2026, it changes. It has to go into the Roth. above a certain income threshold. I think it's 145,000 or something,
Yeah,
Peter.
yeah. So you
Yep.
mentioned that more and more plans are offering the Roth 401k component. Chris, is this in 2026 almost going to be a de facto mandate that all 401ks must incorporate a Roth option since it's a requirement for those making catch up over that income limit?
Yeah, I would think so. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it certainly would make sense because it would relieve liability on the companies that didn't have it. We have it in ours, and it didn't cost anything extra, so it's not that big of a deal. Yep.
Step eight, long-term financial success in the year and years ahead. Build that full emergency fund. And Chris, maybe we can rethink the emergency fund. It doesn't mean it has to just sit in a low interest checking or savings account, as long as it's accessible, right?
Absolutely. And, when Peter and I were talking before we hit the record button, we were talking some investment strategies, and, I use a certain fund that's a real high dividend payer. I said, that's my emergency fund. It's not a money market account. I get hell of a lot higher dividend out of it. And, dividends are taxed at the capital gains rate. Interest is taxed at ordinary income rate. So for me, dividends make a heck of a lot more sense than interest does. So yeah, but and it is in there for emergency purposes in case the riskier assets, go south, for an example. And but I deal with many clients that don't have the tax issues that we may have running businesses right now. And so, a money market account at the local bank or even a savings or whatever, certainly makes a lot of sense. 6 months, they say, 6 to 12 months, I think, is the Dave Ramsey there. We're giving Dave a lot of commercials here today, but
Yeah.
he obviously does deserve a lot of good credence. He does a lot of good for millions of Americans, especially that younger generation,
Yep.
and we run into a lot of those. You probably do too in your neck of the woods, Peter, where coaches them on getting rid of that bad debt and get that house paid off. So, yep,
Yep.
credence to Mr. Ramsey for
It
sure.
has helped tens of millions of people get out of debt across the country as class taught in many churches and schools and just following what works. I know that he can seem a little brash at times, but sometimes people need to hear it in a certain way for the message to sink in. And yeah, down here, we are in Dave country. I think people love God, Dave, and their mom in that order. Sometimes it seems like that, Chris.
Yeah.
Step nine, one of maybe the best opportunities and most overlooked is build a taxable brokerage investment account. Not everything you have needs to go into these retirement investments. You can invest outside of retirement accounts, Chris, and a lot of people miss that opportunity.
Yeah, and personally, I have much more money outside IRA accounts than I do inside IRA accounts. Probably close to 10 to 1 is my ratio. Now, most folks listen to this radio show, it's probably 95% of their money is in the 401k versus outside of the 401k because, they work for an employer and they have that ability. We run a business, so we have, other our revenue streams are set up a little bit differently and we're not always on a regular payroll. So I'm not being critical, but yeah, that's where, capital gains taxes can be more friendly outside of that IRA account versus the withdrawals from an IRA that are income taxes as well. So, having money in different buckets certainly makes sense. I've got my taxable bucket, which would be the brokerage account. I have a tax-free bucket, which might be your Roth IRA, and then your taxable bucket, which would be your traditional 401k and traditional IRA side. Yep.
Well, I think that segues nicely into your last item on this list. Step 10, plan in advance for taxes. And I think too often, Chris, the message here, we are reactive to taxes. We just deal with them as they come up and sort of hit us. We need to plan for them in advance. And that taxable brokerage account, one of the ways that we can control future taxes.
Yeah, without a doubt there, Peter, we like to, discuss taxes and look at that. We did a lot of Roth conversions this year, probably more than any other time in our practice's history. the message is getting out there. The tax rates now, we know they're going to be extended through the one big beautiful bill under the current administration. So certainly take advantage of that. We don't do Roth conversions typically until later on in the year. So, in 2026, it might be something you want to look at in that September, October, November timeframe where you know what your income has already been for the year, and a little easier to tax plan with only 1 or 2 months left in the calendar year versus 10 or 12.
Well, success in the year ahead does not require perfection, but it should entail a plan, direction, discipline, and the right order of operations are going to make the difference, ladies and gentlemen, in your results. So let's make sure you've got that plan in place, your game plan for retirement. It is a personalized plan specific to you, your goals and objectives with a long-term vision and time horizon, the steps, the order of operations to help you achieve those goals with diversified strategies. And Chris McIntire there with you to help implement and monitor and execute the plan along the way. An experienced, qualified professional who has seen retirement many, many, many times over. He can help you make sure you're implementing the steps that work, and we'll build toward that success for you. Give a call to get that process started. That game plan for retirement, the plan in your hands that you can receive there only at McIntire Retirement Services. You can get the process started by calling 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532, as so many proactive savers and investors throughout Northwest Ohio have done, but so many more need to get that plan or double check on your current plan. So give a call to McIntire Retirement Services, 419-332-0532. Chris, always a pleasure having you here on the program as our guide.
Yay, thanks. Good to be with you, buddy. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and may God bless America. Take care.
Tune into Chris McIntire's full radio program and visit McIntireRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.